blood money. That's what Jake Palmer called it as he counted the stacks of cash hidden in the director's safe at Sunrise Recovery Center, $8,000 per patient, per month. All while addicts were trapped inside, drugged beyond recognition, and billed for treatment they never received. With his tailored suit and silver tongue, Jake had infiltrated the facility as its new financial consultant, ready to take his cut of the insurance fraud scheme. But that night, as he slipped past the isolation rooms, a trembling hand grabbed his wrist. Ellie, a former nurse and mother of two, her eyes clear for the first time in weeks, whispering, "They're killing us in here. You're not like them. I can see it in your eyes." What would drive a lifelong conman to risk everything including his freedom to save the very people he came to exploit? If this story shook you to your core, please comment below with any experiences you've had with addiction or recovery. Like and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose darkness and celebrate redemption. And share this with someone who needs to believe that even in our darkest moments, heroes can emerge from unexpected places. 3 weeks earlier, Jake Palmer sat across from Marcus Wentworth in an upscale Miami restaurant, toying with his untouched whiskey. At 42, Jake had perfected his image, designer suit slightly rumpled to suggest success without pretension. A Rolex that caught the light just so, and eyes that could calculate your net worth while making you feel like the only person in the room. $8,000 per patient per month, Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table. Insurance pays. We keep them longer, we make more. Simple. Jake flipped through the documents, face impassive despite the rush he felt. After his last scam went sideways in Chicago, his accounts were running dangerously low, and my role, financial consultant, make the books look legitimate, occasionally charmed the family members who asked too many questions. Marcus leaned forward. Sunrise Recovery has 5 facilities nationwide. This is the flagship, 93 beds, currently at 84% capacity. Jake did the mental math. Over $600,000 monthly. Clean. Who's running the show? Dr. Phillips, man's brilliant Harvard Medical. Started legitimate, but discovered this model is much more profitable. Marcus smirked. 3-month minimum stays. Most go 6 to 9, and they don't just ... leave. That's the beauty of addiction treatment. Families are desperate. Courts mandate treatment, and our medication protocols ensure compliance. Marcus finished his drink. You need this, Jake. Word is, Chicago got messy. Jake thought of the empty penthouse he could no longer afford, the creditors circling. When do I start? 1 week later, Jake walked through Sunrise Recovery Center's gleaming lobby. Tasteful furniture, soothing colors, inspirational quotes on reclaimed wood. A sanctuary of healing. The brochure promised. Dr. Phillips had the polished demeanor of old money and institutional authority. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Mr. Palmer, your references are impressive. Jake knew they were. He'd created them himself. Marcus speaks highly of your financial acumen. I specialize in optimizing healthcare revenue streams. Jake replied smoothly. I look forward to reviewing your operations. Phillips' office overlooked manicured gardens where patients in color-coded scrubs moved like sedated ghosts. You'll have full access to our financial systems, Phillips explained. However, patient areas are restricted. HIPAA compliance. That evening, Jake was shown to his on-site apartment, another perk of the job. As he unpacked his single suitcase, he glanced at the security badge clipped to his jacket. Limited access. That would change soon enough. In his bathroom, Jake stared at his reflection. The man looking back was a carefully constructed facade, all confidence and charm. No one saw the desperation underneath, the mounting debts, the burned bridges. $8,000 per patient, per month. Jake smiled at his reflection. This wasn't just a score. This was salvation. Jake's first week passed in a blur of spreadsheets and meetings. By day, he charmed the administrative staff with coffee, runs and inside jokes. By night, he memorized the facility's rhythm shift changes at 7 a.m., 3 p.m., and 11 p.m. Medication rounds at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 9 p.m. Security sweeps on odd hours. On his 8th night, Jake waited until 1 a.m. before sliding his newly duplicated master keycard through the reader of the restricted East Wing. The door clicked open. Unlike the sunny, well-appointed common areas, the East Wing was clinical and stark. Rooms lined both sides of a fluorescent-lit corridor, small windows in each door. Jake moved silently, peering into rooms where patients lay in various states of sedation. In room E17, a young man stared vacantly at the ceiling, drool pooling on his pillow. His chart showed 9 months of residence and 3 extended treatment authorizations. Room E23 housed an elderly woman who appeared catatonic. Her insurance authorization showed premium coverage and 14 months of intensive therapy. Jake's stomach tightened. He'd run plenty of cons before, separated plenty of fools from their money. But this, ... A soft sound from room E29 caught his attention. Inside, a woman in her 30s sat on the edge of her bed, rocking slightly. Unlike the others, her eyes seemed clear, alert. She was mumbling something. As Jake watched through the window, she suddenly looked up, straight at him. Their eyes locked. Before Jake could move, she was at the door. Please, she whispered through the crack. They'll come for rounds soon. Please. Against his better judgment, Jake swiped his card. The door opened with a soft hiss. You're new, she said, voice raspy from disuse. Not like the others. I'm not a doctor, Jake replied cautiously. I know what you are. She stood straighter, and Jake could see the shadow of someone stronger beneath the hospital gown and unwashed hair. My name is Ellie. I've been here 11 months. I'm not supposed to be anymore. Voluntary check-in. At first I had a problem after my accident. Pain pills. She gestured to a slight limp. I was a nurse. I knew better. Came here for a 30-day program. Her laugh was hollow. That was last July. Why don't you just leave? She pulled up her sleeve, revealing track marks that didn't match a recreational user's pattern. They keep us compliant. When family visits, they reduce the meds just enough so we seem improved but still needing treatment. I've tried telling my sister, but she tapped her head. Who believes the addict? Footsteps echoed from the corridor junction. Jake stepped back instinctively. They're killing us, Ellie whispered urgently, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. Not all at once. Slowly. For profit. Her eyes, brown with flecks of gold, bore into his. You're not like them. I can see it in your eyes. Jake pulled away. You don't know me. I know enough. She stepped back as the footsteps grew louder. Room E42. After morning meds, they shortchange her because she's Medicaid, not private insurance. She'll die this month. Watch. Jake closed her door just as a night nurse rounded the corner. He nodded professionally, holding up his badge. Financial audit, he explained smoothly. Later, in his apartment, Jake poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon. He wasn't supposed to care about these people. They were just numbers on a spreadsheet. Dollar signs for his bank account. $8,000 per patient, per month. But Ellie's eyes haunted him. Clear eyes in a place designed to keep everyone. Foggy. Morning arrived with merciless fluorescent brightness. Jake sat in his office, rubbing his temples as he scrolled through patient billing records. His eyes were gritty from lack of sleep, his mind still replaying his encounter with Ellie. On his screen, he pulled up room E42, as Ellie had suggested. The patient, Doris Whitman, 68, had been admitted for alcohol dependency following her husband's death. Medicare primary, Medicaid secondary. 9 months in residence. Jake frowned, comparing her medication logs to those of private insurance patients. The difference was subtle but significant. Lower quality, anti-anxiety medications. Less frequent monitoring, cheaper sedatives with harsher side effects. But the billing told a different story. Sunrise charged the government the same premium rates while providing substandard care. Even more disturbing were the extended treatment authorization forms, all signed with the same shaky signature that didn't match Mrs. Whitman's intake forms. Jake clicked through more files, finding the pattern repeating. Patients with premium private insurance received medication protocols designed to keep them compliant but stable. Government-insured patients received cheaper alternatives with more dangerous side effects. All were kept just functional enough to present as in treatment when families visited. A knock at his door startled him. Head nurse Sandra Wells stood there, arms crossed over her clipboard. Financial consultants don't usually take such interest in medication protocols, she observed coolly. Jake switched screens smoothly. Just running cost-benefit analyses. Dr. Phillips wants options for optimizing our pharmaceutical expenditures. Sandra's thin lips pressed even thinner. Phillips doesn't share financial strategies with nursing staff. Then I guess I'm telling tales out of school. Jake winked conspiratorially. Don't rat me out. After she left, Jake locked his door and continued digging. The picture emerging was grotesque. Patients admitted for 30-day programs were routinely kept 6 to 12 months. Discharge plans were created, then clinical setbacks would be documented. Extending stays, insurance was billed for therapy sessions that patient logs showed never happened. That afternoon, Jake attended a staff meeting where Dr. Phillips discussed a problem patient, becoming increasingly agitated and resistant to treatment room. E29 requires medication adjustment, Phillips told Sandra. Increase Haldol to 10 milligrams. Add at the Fundua milligram T. Jake's chest tightened. E29. Dr. Sandra replied, that dosage combination is perfectly within accepted parameters. Phillips cut her off. Patient has demonstrated manipulation behaviors consistent with borderline personality disorder. Jake had seen Ellie's file. There was no personality disorder diagnosis. I'll update her chart, Phillips continued. Family visit scheduled next week. We need compliance by then. That night, Jake found himself outside room E29 again. Ellie sat cross-legged on her bed, eyes closed, breathing deliberately. They're increasing your meds tomorrow, Jake said without preamble after entering. Ellie didn't seem surprised. I've been refusing to swallow them, nursing 101 check under the tongue. She studied him. Why are you telling me this? I looked into room E42 and others. Doris, sweet lady, shouldn't even be here anymore. Ellie's eyes narrowed. What's your angle? I don't have one, Jake said, surprising himself with the truth. Everyone has an angle. She moved closer. What's yours? Jake Palmer, financial consultant. His name on her lips sent a chill through him. Audio overheard. Phillips, not as drugged as they think. She smiled slightly. So, what's your real job here? Because you're no consultant? Before Jake could respond, the night med cart rattled in the hallway. He slipped out, Ellie's knowing gaze following him. Back in his apartment, Jake pulled a worn photograph from his wallet. His sister Emily smiled back at him. Forever 29. Forever before the overdose that took her. Before the rehab centers that drained their parents' retirement fund without helping her. Before Jake found her, cold and alone in her apartment. Damn it, Em, he whispered. What am I supposed to do here? The morning brought a summons from Marcus Wentworth. They met in the facility's garden, patients shuffling along walkways under staff supervision. Philip says, "You're fitting in nicely," Marcus observed, lighting a cigarette. "Finding your way around?" Jake nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "The operation is impressive." "It's a fucking goldmine," Marcus replied, blowing smoke toward a cluster of patients. "Know how we get them? 3 main pipelines. Court-mandated treatment judges who refer to us get kickbacks through consulting fees. Then there's our street team. They hang around NA meetings, homeless shelters, find desperate people, offer free luxury treatment. Once they're in, we find something wrong enough to keep insurance paying." Jake watched an elderly man being guided by a nurse, his steps faltering, and the third pipeline. "My favorite, we pay interventionists to convince families they're loved. Ones need immediate help. Scared parents, spouses, they'll sign anything." Marcus chuckled. "One signature on our admission forms and we have 90 days minimum." Jake thought of Emily. Their parents had remortgaged their home for her third treatment center. Insurance companies don't question 9-month stays for alcohol dependency. That's where Phillips is brilliant. Progressive diagnosis. Patient comes in for alcohol, we discover underlying trauma requiring specialized treatment. Then we find borderline personality traits, then potential bipolar indicators. Marcus tapped his temple. Always another layer to justify extended care. A young man in blue scrubs approached, eyes downcast. "Excuse me, sir. It's time for my medication." Jake recognized him from the files. Taylor Chen, 19. Admitted for Adderall abuse for months ago. "Not now," Marcus snapped. "If I'm late, I get demerits," Taylor mumbled. "Another week added." Marcus sighed dramatically. "See what I deal with. Go bother someone else." After Taylor shuffled away, Marcus continued. "The beauty is, most have burned bridges with family. No one advocating for them. The few who have visitors, we manage carefully." He checked his watch. "Speaking of which, I'm conducting a tour for potential investors this afternoon. We're something impressive." As Marcus walked away, Jake found himself remembering his childhood in Newark. His father, a dock worker, coming home smelling of fish and cigarettes. The cramped apartment where he and Emily shared a bedroom until she turned 12. The constant hustle to make ends meet. Jake had sworn he'd never be poor again. His first con, at 17 selling fake concert tickets. Then credit card scams. Then investment schemes. Each more elaborate, more profitable. Emily had taken a different path. Nursing school, a legitimate life. Until the car accident shattered her spine, and oxycodone shattered everything else. Near the garden's edge, Jake noticed Taylor sitting alone, staring at nothing. Beyond him, an older man with military posture despite his hunched shoulders. Mike Brennan. According to his file, Vietnam vet, alcohol and Valium dependency. Seated by the fountain was Mrs. Chen, no relation to Taylor, admitted for anxiety management after her husband's death. Now 14 months in residence. Faces to the files. People, not just numbers. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Investors arrive 2 p.m. Your cut from last month's billings hits your account today. 5 OK, don't spend it all in one place. $50,000. For doing nothing but looking the other way." As Jake pocketed his phone, he noticed a janitor watching him, an older Hispanic man with knowing eyes. Their gazes met briefly before. The janitor returned to mopping, the same spot he'd been working on for several minutes. Something about the man's deliberate movements triggered Jake's conman instincts. The janitor was paying too much attention while pretending not to. Jake wasn't the only one watching this place carefully. 3 nights later, Jake found himself once again in the East Wing, this time with purpose. He'd spent hours combing through records, identifying the most at-risk patients. Now, a small Ziploc bag of pills sat in his pocket, medication he'd carefully collected by claiming audit samples. When he reached Ellie's room, she was waiting, sitting on the edge of her bed. "You came back," she said simply. "I looked into what you said." Jake glanced down the hallway before entering. "About Doris and E42? You were right." Ellie's expression remained guarded. "And I brought these." Jake handed her the bag of pills. "Your correct dosages. The real medications, not the cocktail Phillips prescribed." She examined the pills with practiced precision. Nurse for 12 years. Pediatric oncology. A sad smile crossed her face. "Ironic, isn't it? Spent my career helping children fight for their lives, then nearly threw mine away." "How long have you been clear-headed?" 3 weeks. started palming meds. When I realized what was happening, she tucked the pills into a small hole she'd made in her mattress. You never answered my question. What's your angle? Jake hesitated. In his world, truth was a liability. But something about Ellie's direct gaze made lies feel pointless. I'm not who you think I am. I know exactly who you are, she replied. A con man working with Marcus and Phillips. Jake's surprise must have shown on his face. Overheard them talking. You're their new financial wizard, helping launder insurance. Money. Her voice contained no judgment, just flat observation. Question is, why are you helping me? Before Jake could answer, a soft knock came at the door. The janitor Jake had noticed in the garden slipped inside, moving with surprising stealth for a man his age. Carlos. Ellie greeted him. This is Jake. He knows. Carlos nodded. I see this before. In my country, they call them ghost hospitals. People go in, money comes out, people stay until they die, or money stops. He's been smuggling messages for me, Ellie explained. To my sister? Dangerous, Jake observed. Carlos shrugged. My son died in a place like this in Mexico. No one helped him. The simple statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. There's a new patient, Carlos continued. Room W15, young girl, maybe 20. They give her too much already, eyes like glass. Ellie looked at Jake. That's the welcome protocol. Heavy sedation until family leaves, then stabilization at lower doses. Jake thought of the investors' tour he'd helped lead that afternoon. The carefully selected success stories presented to potential partners' patients, coherent enough to parrot rehearsed testimonials about Sunrise's miraculous program. I need to know who I'm dealing with, Ellie said. If you're playing both sides, I need to know now. Jake thought of the $50,000 in his account, of Marcus's promises of more to come, of his empty Miami condo and mounting debts. Then he thought of Emily, of Taylor Chen's vacant eyes, of Doris Whitman, dying slowly in room E42. I'm not playing both sides, he said finally. Not anymore. Then help us, Carlos said. There are others like us, staff who see but stay quiet to keep jobs. Like who? Night nurse in West Wing. Kitchen supervisor. One security guard. Carlos counted on his fingers. Small help. Smuggle real food. Forget to lock doors sometimes. Not enough to free anyone, Ellie added, but enough to keep hope alive. Jake ran a hand through his hair. What exactly are you asking me to do? Ellie's eyes, clear and determined, met his. Everything you can. The plan came together in whispered conversations over 3 days. Taylor Chen would be their test case. Wang, physically healthy despite over-medication, and with a grandmother in San Diego willing to take him in. His insurance authorization ends next week, Jake explained to Ellie and Carlos in the facilities. Laundry room? Phillips already submitted paperwork for an extension claiming breakthrough trauma discovery, so they'll increase his meds to show instability, Ellie concluded. Exactly. Tomorrow night we move before that happens. Carlos nodded. My cousin works for airport shuttle service. He will drive, no questions. The next evening, Jake accessed the medication logs and created a digital trail suggesting Taylor had received his evening doses. Meanwhile, Ellie had carefully substituted his actual medication with harmless lookalikes over the past 2 days, allowing his mind to clear. At 1:17 a.m. Jake disabled the alarm on the west exit by accidentally spilling coffee on the security panel during his late-night work session. The guard on duty, one of their allies, was distracted with paperwork as Carlos led Taylor through the kitchen service area toward the exit. Jake watched the security cameras from his laptop, his finger hovering over the reset button that would restore the system if they were discovered. His heart pounded painfully against his ribs. This wasn't like his usual cons, where the worst consequence was running from angry investors. If caught, they faced actual criminal charges. On screen, he watched Carlos and Taylor reach the exit. The door opened. No alarm. They stepped outside. Jake switched to the exterior camera. Carlos's cousin waited in an unmarked van, engine running. Taylor climbed in. Carlos slipped him an envelope emergency cash Jake had withdrawn, instructions to contact Ellie's sister for temporary shelter, and a burner phone. The van pulled away. Just another late-night staff departure. Jake exhaled slowly, closing his laptop. Phase 1 complete. He was halfway back to his apartment when Sandra Wells emerged from a side corridor. Working late, Mr. Palmer? She asked, eyes narrowing. Quarterly. Projections, he replied smoothly. Dr. Phillips wanted them by morning. Interesting. He mentioned nothing about that in our administrative meeting. Jake shrugged. Maybe he forgot. You know how Phillips gets when investor reports are due. Sandra studied him for an uncomfortable moment. The security panel in West Wing malfunctioned earlier. Maintenance is checking it tomorrow. Mercury in retrograde, Jake offered with a disarming smile. Technology goes haywire. Indeed, she didn't return his smile. By the way, have you seen Taylor Chen? Room check found his bed empty. Jake felt ice in his veins but kept his expression neutral. I thought patients weren't allowed to wander at night. They're not. Her voice hardened. If you see anything unusual, report it immediately. Good night, Mr. Palmer. The facility erupted in controlled chaos the next morning. Security guards checked every room, closet, and office. Dr. Phillips interrogated staff while Marcus Wentworth paced the administrative offices, face mottled with rage. Insurance was paying $9,500 monthly for that kid, he shouted when he cornered Jake. Premium substance abuse plus PTSD treatment. Maybe he just wandered off property, Jake suggested. Medication error, Marcus snorted. Impossible. Sandra runs a tight ship with meds. He lowered his voice. This looks bad to our investors. Very bad. Find out what happened. You have access to everything. Use it. That afternoon, Ellie sat across from Jake in the garden. Their conversation, hidden by ambient noise from a nearby fountain. Taylor made it to my sister's, she whispered. She drives him to his grandmother's tomorrow. Jake nodded slightly. Sandra's suspicious. Security's being upgraded. Worth it. Ellie's face showed a glimpse of the determined nurse she once was. 1 down, 86 to go, Jake muttered. And now they're watching. Are you having second thoughts? Jake thought of Taylor's vacant eyes, gradually clearing as his real self emerged from the chemical fog. No, but we need a better plan for the next one, and we need to prioritize. Ellie slipped him a folded napkin. Already done. These 5 first, most at risk. Jake palmed the napkin as a security guard walked past. It gets harder from here. Ellie's hand briefly touched his. You could walk away, take your money, and disappear. The thought had occurred to him many times. No, he said simply. I can't. Jake sat alone in his apartment, a glass of bourbon untouched beside him as rain lashed against the windows. In his hands, he held the photograph of Emily smiling. Vibrant, alive, taken 2 years before her accident, before the pain, before the pills. The memory surfaced unbidden, finding her apartment door unlocked, calling her name, the silence that answered, Emily on the bathroom floor, needle still in her arm. Too late for Narcan, too late for anything but grief. His phone buzzed. Marcus. We need to talk, Marcus said without preamble. Phillips is reviewing security footage from the night Chen disappeared. Jake's pulse quickened, and nothing conclusive yet. Marcus's voice hardened. But I know a con when I see one. Palmer. I brought you in because you're good. Don't make me regret it. I've been here every night working on those projections you wanted, Jake replied, keeping his voice level. Check the security logs from my office. I did. A pause. There's a 2-minute gap near the west exit camera. Probably system glitch, but convenient timing. What are you implying? Nothing yet, Marcus sighed. Look, we've got bigger problems. Phillips wants to transfer 5 patients to our Atlanta facility, says they're disrupting treatment protocols here. Jake glanced at the list Ellie had given him, the 5 most at-risk patients. Which patients? Brennan from W7, the old lady in E42, that former nurse in E29. Ellie, Jake said before he could stop himself. On a first-name basis with the merchandise? Palmer. Marcus's voice dripped with suspicion. Interesting. I interviewed her for the financial audit. Jake recovered smoothly. Needed a patient perspective on service quality. Right. Marcus clearly didn't believe him. Transfers happen Friday. I'm flying in tomorrow to oversee personally. After Marcus hung up, Jake paced his small apartment. Friday, 3 days to save 5 lives including Ellie's. A knock at his door froze him mid-stride. Jake checked the peephole, then quickly opened the door. Mike Brennan stood there. The former military man's posture straight despite months of sedation. Behind him, Carlos kept watch. Sir, Mike said formally, his words carefully enunciated as he fought through medication fog. The nurse Ellie said to warn you. They're watching her. Sandra took her phone privileges. How did you get out of your room, Carlos? Mike nodded toward the janitor. I was Marine Force Recon. Observation skills never quite leave you. Noticed Carlos helping others. Offered my assistance. Jake ushered them inside, mind racing. They're planning to transfer you, Mike, Atlanta facility. Understood. Worse than here, according to rumors. We need to accelerate our timeline, Jake decided. All 5 of you need to be out before Friday. Carlos shook his head. Too risky. Security doubled since Taylor left. We don't have a choice. Jake turned to Mike. Can you get a message too? Ellie affirmative. Morning recreation period. Jake scribbled a note and handed it to Mike. Tell her we move tomorrow night. All 5 at once. After they left, Jake pulled out his laptop and accessed Sunrise's patient database. He needed to create plausible digital trails for all 5 targeted patients' medication logs, therapy notes, progress indicators that would discourage immediate pursuit. As he worked, Emily's photograph stared up at him from the desk. I'm trying, Em, he whispered. I'm finally trying to do something right. His phone rang again, this time an unknown number. Hello, Jake Palmer? A young man's voice, vaguely familiar. Who's asking? It's Taylor, Taylor Chen. The voice gained confidence. I made it to my grandmother's. I wanted to thank you. Jake closed his eyes, emotion unexpectedly tightening his throat. You shouldn't be calling me, I know. I'll throw this phone away after, but I needed to say it. A pause. I was disappearing in there, becoming nothing. You gave me my life back. Stay clean, Taylor. Make it worth the risk. I will. Taylor's voice cracked. There's something else. My roommate, Darius. He stopped breathing last night. I heard the code blue. The way they medicated Heimet was just like what they started doing to me. After hanging up, Jake stared at the rain streaming down his window. The stakes had just gotten higher. This wasn't just about fraud anymore. It was about survival. Dawn broke with the sound of helicopter blades. Jake watched from his window as Marcus Wentworth stepped onto the helipad, flanked by two men whose stiff postures screamed security rather than medical professionals. His burner phone vibrated with a text from Carlos. Kitchen staff confirmed. Vanna reigned. Jake deleted the message immediately. The pieces were falling into place, but the risks were mounting. He'd spent the night building their escape plan, calling in favors from his less savory connections. A forger in Openlaca was preparing identification documents. A nurse practitioner who'd lost her license for prescription fraud had agreed to provide medical supervision for the most vulnerable patients. During transport, his legitimate bank account now held only enough money to avoid suspicion. The rest, including Marcus's $50,000 payment, had been transferred to accounts accessible only through cryptocurrencies, ready to fund their escape and the patient's initial care. A knock at his office door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Phillips entered without waiting for a response. Mr. Palmer. Phillips smiled thinly. I understand you've been conducting patient interviews without authorization. Jake maintained his composure. Part of my financial audit. Dr. Patient satisfaction affects insurance reauthorization rates. Indeed. Phillips placed a folder on Jake's desk. Yet you seem particularly interested in patients scheduled for transfer. Jake glanced at the folder without opening it. Coincidence? I selected a random sampling, including Elizabeth Morrison and the former nurse. Is there a problem? Dr. Phillips studied him for an uncomfortable moment. Ms. Morrison has demonstrated increasing non-compliance this morning. Her blood work showed inconsistent medication levels. Jake kept his expression neutral. Perhaps a metabolism issue. Perhaps Phillips didn't sound convinced. Or perhaps someone has been interfering with her treatment protocol. He leaned forward. Sunrise Recovery Center operates on trust, Mr. Palmer. Trust between our staff, our investors, and our leadership. The implied threat hung in the air between them. Of course, Jake agreed smoothly. Without trust, the entire system fails. Precisely. Phillips straightened. Marcus is concerned about your integration into our team. Prove him wrong. After Phillips left, Jake immediately texted Carlos. Accelerate, tonight. In the recreation room that afternoon, Jake observed the chess tables, where Mike Brennan sat opposite Mrs. Chen, both moving pieces with sedated deliberation, two casual observers. They were just two patients passing time. In reality, Mike was briefing her on the escape plan. Across the room, Ellie sat by a window, pretending to read. Her eyes occasionally met Jake's, communicating silent understanding. Jake approached the nurse's station where Sandra was updating charts. Ms. Wells, he greeted her professionally. I need to verify some medication costs for my report. Do you have a minute? Sandra's suspicion was evident, but professional courtesy compelled her compliance. As Jake engaged her in conversation about pharmaceutical suppliers, Carlos slipped through the staff door behind the station, planting a small device under the desk. Phase 1 complete. Later, in the staff locker room, Jake changed into scrubs, part of his cover for being on the patient floors. As he closed his locker, a voice behind him froze him in place. Interesting hobby for a financial consultant. Jake turned to find Sandra, arms crossed, expression hard. Just trying to understand the full patient experience, he replied, like you did with Elizabeth Morrison. Sandra stepped closer. I saw you entering her room after hours. Jake's mind raced. Denial would only confirm her suspicions. Instead, he sighed dramatically. You caught me. I was hoping to keep it professional, but, he shrugged, there's something about her. Sandra's eyes widened slightly. You're involved with a patient. Nothing physical. Jake lied smoothly. Just ... a connection. I know it's inappropriate. It's grounds for immediate termination. Please. Jake lowered his voice. Phillips already has concerns about me. If this gets back to him, Sandra studied him, conflict evident in her expression. After a long moment, she sighed. I don't approve, but she glanced around to ensure they were alone. I've worked here 3 years, seen things that keep me awake at night. What do you mean? Patients who should have been discharged months ago. Medication protocols that ... She shook her head. I've tried raising concerns through proper channels. Jake took a calculated risk and 2 nurses before me did the same. Both terminated for performance issues. Sandra's professional veneer cracked slightly. I have student loans. I can't lose this job. Jake recognized the opening. What if you could do something that would matter? Sandra's eyes met, his wariness battling with something else, hope perhaps, or the desire for absolution. I don't know what you're planning, she said quietly, but be careful. Marcus brought security personnel with him today, not the usual rent-a-cabs. As she walked away, Jake wondered if he'd just gained an ally or signed their death warrant. Either way, the clock was ticking. Tonight, they would make their move. Sunset painted Sunrise Recovery Center in deceptively warm hues as Jake finalized the details. The small device Carlos had planted would trigger a false fire alarm in the east wing at precisely 1:23 a.m., creating the diversion they needed. Meanwhile, Jake had manipulated the electronic medication records to show all 5 target patients had received heavy sedation, buying them hours before anyone would expect them to be mobile. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from his contact in Miami. The safe house was ready, a foreclosed property in his friend Riley's name. Off the grid enough to hide 5 people for 24 hours until more permanent arrangements could be made. As Jake rounded the corner toward the administrator's office to collect the transfer paperwork he'd need to forge, he nearly collided with Marcus Palmer. Marcus nodded, his gaze sharp. Just who I was looking for. Jake felt his pulse quicken but kept his expression neutral. What can I help you with? Join me for a drink, not a request. My office? Marcus's temporary office was a study in intimidation, blinds drawn, desk positioned to force visitors to sit with their backs to the door. He poured 2 glasses of scotch, sliding one toward Jake. Tell me about Elizabeth Morrison. Jake sipped his drink, using the moment to compose his thoughts. Patient in E29, former nurse. Opioid dependency following workplace injury. What about her? Cut the shit, Palmer. Marcus set his glass down hard enough that amber liquid sloshed over the rim. Security footage shows you entering her room 3 times this week. Jake had anticipated this. Like I told Sandra, I made a mistake. Personal attraction compromised my professional judgment. Bullshit. Marcus leaned forward. You've run your share of cons, but you've never been stupid enough to risk a payday over a piece of ass. Jake felt anger flare at the crude description, but channeled it into his performance. Everyone has weaknesses. Marcus, even me. Maybe. Marcus didn't look convinced. But here's what I think. I think you're planning something. Taylor Chun's disappearance was too convenient. And now you're spending time with patients scheduled for transfer. He smiled unpleasantly. Phillips wants to accelerate the transfers. Tomorrow morning? Jake worked to keep his expression neutral. That's administration's call.
It is?
Marcus studied him. And you'll be joining them to ensure a smooth transition. Flight leaves at 8 a.m. Atlanta team is expecting you. A knock at the door saved Jake from responding. Sandra Wells entered, her professional mask firmly in place. Mr. Wentworth? Dr. Phillips needs you in the West Wing. Patient situation. Marcus scowled. We'll continue this later, Palmer. After Marcus left, Sandra locked the door behind him. They know, she said without preamble. Not everything, but enough. Phillips ordered a complete security review of your activities, and Marcus brought in ex-military contractors to assist. With the transfers, Jake's mind raced. How do you know this? Because they asked me to help monitor you. Sandra's expression was unreadable. They think I'm gathering evidence. Are you? She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and handed him a key card. East Wing maintenance access. It doesn't trigger the door logs. Jake studied her, searching for a trap. Why? Doris Whitman, in E42 reminds me of my grandmother. Sandra's professional veneer cracked slightly, and I became a nurse to help people, not imprison them. After she left, Jake texted Carlos. Plan compromised. Moving now. It was barely 9 p.m. hours earlier than planned. The night shift hadn't even started, and the day staff were still completing their rounds. But waiting meant certain failure. Jake grabbed his laptop and the flash drive containing evidence he'd been gathering. As he headed toward the East Wing, he passed the security office where a guard monitored the camera feeds. Through the open door, Jake saw his own face on one of the screen's footage from earlier that day, being reviewed frame by frame. The hunt was on, and Jake was the prey. Carlos met Jake at the maintenance access door, his usual calm demeanor fractured by urgency. They took Mike, he whispered. Security came during dinner, said he needed special evaluation. Jake cursed under his breath. Where? Isolation ward. Basement. Carlos glanced nervously over his shoulder. Sandra is trying to access, but her clearance won't work for isolation. Jake ran a hand through his hair. What about the others? Mrs. Chen and Doris are in the East Day room for evening activities. Ellie is in her room. They've restricted her movements. Jake weighed their options. Attempting to extract Mike from isolation would compromise the entire plan. But leaving him behind, the memory of Emily surfaced again, pale and still on that bathroom floor. Alone. New plan, Jake decided. Get the van ready. I'll bring everyone to the East Maintenance exit in 20 minutes. What about Mike? Jake thought of the former Marine, his discipline and quiet dignity, even through the medication fog. I'll get him. Somehow. As Carlos slipped away, Jake checked his burner phone. A text from Riley confirmed she was in position 2 blocks away, ready to provide secondary transportation if needed. Jake moved through the corridors with practiced casualness, nodding to staff, consulting a clipboard as if on official business. He reached the East Eye room where Doris Whitman and Mrs. Chen sat among a dozen Other patients watching a sanitized reality show on a mounted television. He caught Doris's eye and gave a subtle nod toward the door. She understood immediately. Nudging Mrs. Chen, both women rose shakily, moving toward the water cooler near the exit. Ladies. Jake greeted them loudly enough for the attendant to hear. Dr. Phillips asked me to escort you to your medication review. The young attendant barely looked up from his phone. Sign them out, please. Jake scribbled eligibly on the clipboard and guided both women into the hallway. Once clear, he spoke urgently. Plans changed. We're leaving now. Can you both walk unassisted? Mrs. Chen nodded firmly despite her frail appearance. I was faking half my symptoms for months. They keep you longer if you seem helpless. Smart woman, Jake smiled briefly. Head to the East Maintenance door. Carlos is waiting. As they shuffled away, Jake continued to Ellie's room. He found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, eyes closed in meditation. They snapped open when he entered. They took Mike, she said immediately. I know, working on it. Sandra told me they're watching you. Ellie rose, already dressed in layers despite the Florida heat preparation for their original escape plan. Marcus suspects something. Jake checked the hallway. We're moving now. Others are already heading to the exit. Ellie grabbed his arm. Jake, Mike knows everything. Names, contacts, the safe house location. If they break him, they won't, Jake assured her, hoping it wasn't a lie. Marines don't break eyes easily. They were halfway to the maintenance exit when an alarm blared. The subtle fire alarm they'd planned, but a harsh security alert that echoed through the corridors. Code Yellow in East Wing, announced the overhead speaker. All patients returned to rooms immediately. Jake pulled Ellie into a supply closet as footsteps pounded past. Through the crack in the door, they watched security personnel running toward the maintenance area. They found Carlos, Ellie whispered. Jake's burner phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Maintenance exit, compromised. West delivery dock clear. Sandra, Jake realized. She's helping us. They waited until the corridor cleared, then moved in the opposite direction, circling toward the West Wing. As they passed the administrative offices, raised voices caught their attention, undermining months of work. Phillips was shouting. For patients missing already. Secure the perimeter, Marcus responded. No one leaves. Where's Palmer? Jake pulled Ellie faster, cutting through the kitchen toward the loading dock. As they pushed through the swinging doors, a figure stepped from the shadows. Sandra, this way, she whispered, leading them toward a service elevator. Carlos and the others are in the laundry truck. As the elevator descended, Jake studied Sandra. Why risk your career? She didn't meet his eyes. The things I've witnessed here? I'll never sleep again if I don't do something. The elevator opened to the basement level. Sandra led them through storage areas, toward the loading dock. Mike is 3 doors down, she said, pointing to a heavily secured corridor. I can't get you in there, I'm sorry. Jake looked at the security panel, then at his watch. The others were waiting. Every minute increased their risk of capture. He had to choose. Get Ellie to the truck, Jake decided, handing Sandra his burner phone. My contact Riley is 2 blocks south. Text her if the truck is compromised. What about you? Ellie demanded. I'm getting Mike. Ellie shook her head. They'll catch you. Probably, Jake admitted, but I'm not leaving him. Then I'm staying too. Jake started to argue, but the determination in Ellie's eyes stopped him. It was the same look Emily had when she'd decided something, the one that meant arguing was pointless. Both of you are insane, Sandra whispered fiercely. There are armed security contractors up there. Get the others out, Jake told her. That's the priority. After Sandra reluctantly left, Jake studied the security panel controlling access to the isolation corridor. Standard electronic lock, keycard, plus PIN. He couldn't hack it, but maybe. I need a diversion, he told Ellie. Something to draw security away from this area. She considered for a moment, then moved to a wall-mounted fire alarm. Old school, but effective. Wait, Jake grabbed her wrist. If you pull that, every exit seals automatic. Fire protocol, not the loading dock, Ellie countered. Fire regulations require at least 1 ground-level exit to remain accessible for emergency services. You're sure? I worked in hospitals for 12 years? Trust me. Jake nodded. Okay, pull it, then hide. I'll get Mike. The alarm's shriek was instantaneous and deafening. Emergency lights strobed, bathing the corridor in pulsing red. Jake waited until he heard footsteps pounding above them, then moved to the security panel. During his second week at Sunrise, Jake had accidentally spilled coffee on Phillips' desk, forcing the doctor to change his suit. While Phillips was gone, Jake had photographed the emergency protocols taped inside his desk drawer, including override codes. The isolation ward's emergency override was 9173 pound. Jake punched it in, holding his breath. The light turned green, the door clicked open. Mike Brennan sat on a bare mattress in a windowless room, hands folded in his lap. Despite the circumstances, his posture remained military straight. His eyes, however, were cloudy. Recently medicated. Palmer, he slurred, struggling to focus. Time to move, Marine. Jake helped him stand. Can you walk? Mike nodded, fighting through the chemical fog. They asked questions. About you. About Ellie. What did you tell them? Name, rank. Serial number? Mike managed a small smile. Jake guided him into the corridor where Ellie waited. Together, they supported Mike toward the loading dock, moving as quickly as his drugged state allowed. They emerged into organized chaos. Staff directed patients toward assembly points, while security personnel searched systematically through each section. Through the loading dock's open door, Jake could see the laundry truck still parked on the ramp, engine running. Almost there, he encouraged Mike. They were halfway across the loading area when a voice cut through the alarm's wail. Stop right there, Palmer. Marcus stood blocking their path, flanked by 2 security contractors. Both held stun batons at ready position. It's over, Marcus said, his expression a mixture of anger and something else, disappointment perhaps. You threw away a fortune for what? These broken people. Jake positioned himself between Marcus and the others. They're not broken, they're prisoners. They're inventory, Marcus corrected coldly. Assets generating revenue, nothing more. He gestured to the security men. Take them. The larger guard moved forward, baton raised. Jake tensed, preparing for pain. A figure stepped from behind a laundry bin. Sandra, wielding a fire extinguisher. She discharged it directly into the guards' faces, creating a cloud of chemical powder. In the confusion, Jake shoved Marcus hard, sending him sprawling. Go, Sandra shouted, dropping the extinguisher. They half-carried Mike to the truck. Carlos reached down from the driver's seat, helping pull him inside. As Jake turned to assist Ellie, movement caught his eye. Marcus, recovering, reaching inside his jacket. Gun, Jake shouted, pushing Ellie forward. The shot cracked through the air. Jake felt searing heat across his upper arm, but kept moving. Diving into the truck beside Ellie, Sandra slammed the door behind them. Drive, Jake yelled. Carlos floored the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires squealing as they burst through the security gate and onto the street. In the back, surrounded by genuinely dirty laundry and trembling patients, Jake examined his arm. The bullet had grazed him, leaving a bloody furrow across his bicep. You're hit, Ellie said, already tearing a strip from her shirt for a bandage. It's nothing. Jake turned to Sandra, who sat wide-eyed with shock. You just threw away your career. She laughed shakily. I think helping patients escape at gunpoint goes beyond career setback. As adrenaline ebbed, the reality of their situation settled over the group. They were fugitives now, all of them, and Marcus wouldn't stop hunting them. Jake looked at the frightened but determined faces around him. Mrs. Chun, Mike, Ellie, Carlos, Sandra, people he barely knew a week ago, now inextricably bound. To him, his phone buzzed with a text from Riley. Police scanner active. All units alerted. Ditch the truck. Meet at secondary. The storm was gathering, and they were driving straight into it. Riley's secondary location turned out to be a foreclosed marina office 30 minutes outside Miami. As Carlos guided the laundry truck down an overgrown access road, Jake scanned for surveillance cameras or police vehicles. So far, clear. Riley emerged from the shadow of a derelict boathouse. As they approached, a petite woman with close-cropped hair and the hyper-vigilant posture of someone accustomed to looking over her shoulder. She'd been Jake's partner in an investment scam 3 years earlier, disappearing with her cut just before the FBI closed in. Jake had never expected to see her again, let alone trust her with lives. You look like shit, Palmer, she greeted him, eyeing his blood-stained sleeve. Missed you too, Riley. Her gaze swept over the others, climbing stiffly from the truck. These are the packages. More than you mentioned. Change of plans. Riley shrugged. Always is with you. She gestured toward the boathouse. Got medical supplies inside, food burner phones, clean clothes. As the group settled inside, Jake took stock of their situation. Mrs. Chen moved with more confidence now, helping Doris settle onto a worn sofa. Mike sat rigidly in a corner chair, still fighting through sedatives, but more alert by the minute. Sandra checked her phone nervously, scrolling through news alerts. Ellie approached Jake as Riley cleaned and bandaged his arm. What's the timeline? 24 hours here, max, Jake replied. Then we split up. Safer that way. Riley nodded agreement. Got IDs coming for everyone? Basics enough to travel? Rent rooms? Avoid immediate flags? And after that? Ellie pressed. Jake had been asking himself the same question. Running was the obvious answer. New identities, new cities. Leave this mess behind. But running meant Marcus and Phillips would continue their operation. Other patients would suffer, die. We need leverage, he said finally. Evidence that can't be buried. Sandra looked up from her phone. They're calling it a patient rebellion on the news, claiming mentally unstable addicts attacked staff and escaped. Of course they are, Jake muttered. Perfect narrative. Who believes addicts over respected doctors? Riley finished bandaging his arm. Your window's closing fast. Palmer, 12 hours before facial recognition picks you up at any transit hub, 24 before they track financial movements. Jake's laptop held incriminating evidence, billing records, falsified medical authorizations, medication logs showing dangerous protocols. But corporate fraud investigations moved slowly. By the time authorities acted, Marcus would have sanitized everything. They needed something immediate, Something public. Riley, Jake said slowly. You still have contacts in journalism. Depends who's asking. I am with a story that would win someone a Pulitzer. Riley studied him, then pulled out her phone. Maybe. Guy at the Herald. Investigates medical fraud. What are you thinking? Sunrise isn't the only facility in their network. They have 5, all running the same playbook. Jake gestured to the freed patients. Living witnesses. Medical professionals who can verify the abuse. Documentation. Traditional media moves too slowly. Sandra interjected. By the time they verify and approve a story, Phillips will have every patient transferred and every record scrubbed. So we go digital, Ellie suggested. Social media. Direct to public. Jake nodded. Both Riley's contact for legitimacy, social media for immediate pressure. Risky, Riley warned. Once you go public, you're exposed. We already are, Jake countered. Sandra's phone chimed with a text. Her face paled as she read it. What? Jake demanded. My roommate at the facility says Phillips is conducting a complete patient audit, preparing mass transfers starting tomorrow morning. Mike spoke up, his voice stronger now. Cleaning house, removing witnesses. Jake thought of Taylor's call about his roommate. Darius stopped breathing during a routine medication adjustment. How many more would suffer the same fate as Phillips and Marcus eliminated liability? The clock just moved up, Jake told the group. We go public tonight. As the others prepared, Sandra, drafting a statement with Ellie. Mike working with Carlos to inventory which patients were most at risk. Riley contacting her journalist Jake, stepped outside, needing a moment alone. The marina stretched before him, moonlight catching on the still water. In the distance, Miami's skyline glittered indifferently. Somewhere in that skyline, Marcus was coordinating their capture. Phillips was covering his tracks, and dozens of patients remained trapped. Jake's phone vibrated with an incoming text. Unknown number. Palmer, it's Marcus. Let's talk. You're in over your head. Jake stared at the message, temptation coursing through him. Marcus would offer a deal: money, safe passage, a clean slate somewhere far away. All Jake had to do was give up the others. The old Jake would have taken that deal without hesitation. Inside the boathouse, he could hear Ellie's voice, strong, determined, outlining patient symptoms and violations of care standards for Sandra's statement. Beyond her, Doris Whitman hummed softly, a lullaby perhaps. As Mrs. Chen dozed beside her, Jake deleted Marcus's message without responding and turned back toward the boathouse. Toward his choice? By midnight their plan crystallized. Riley's journalist, contact a hungry investigative reporter named Viga had, agreed to meet them at 3 a.m. with the promise of explosive evidence. But first, they needed to create breathing room for the patients still trapped inside Sunrise. Divide their attention, Jake explained, spreading out facility blueprints Riley had somehow procured. Hit them where it hurts their finances. While Sandra and Ellie prepared their testimonials, Jake initiated the first phase. He remotely accessed Sunrise's billing system, using his still-active credentials, and began flagging every patient account for potential insurance fraud investigation. Insurance companies freeze payments during fraud reviews, he explained to Riley, who watched him work with professional appreciation. Standard protocol? Could take weeks to clear. Phillips will override, she noted. Not if the insurance companies initiate the hold themselves. Jake smiled grimly as he composed emails to compliance officers at 12 major insurers, attaching carefully selected evidence of duplicate billing and falsified treatment codes. By morning, their revenue stream turns to a trickle. Meanwhile, Carlos worked his own connections. As a maintenance worker, he'd formed relationships with staff at all levels, including night security guards sympathetic to patients' plight. 3 agreed to look the other way during shift change, creating a critical blind spot in coverage. Mike, now fully lucid as medications cleared his system, directed their tactical approach. Patients in East Wing rooms E1 through E20 are highest risk. Isolation protocols, heavy sedation, they go first. At 1 a.m. Jake made a calculated move. He called Dr. Phillips directly. Palmer, Phillips answered, voice tight with controlled rage. You've created quite a situation. Just getting started, Jake replied coolly. Check your insurance billing portal. Notice anything? A moment of silence. Then the sound of furious typing. When Phillips spoke again, his voice had dropped dangerously. What have you done? Insurance fraud flags on every patient account. Payment holds effective immediately. Jake kept his tone conversational. Oh, and I sent the FBI evidence of your kickback arrangement with Judge Harmon, the one who sends you so many court-mandated patients. This was a bluff. Jake had suspicions about the arrangement, but no concrete evidence. Phillips' sharp intake of breath confirmed his guess. What do you want? Phillips demanded. A conversation, face-to-face, just you and me? You can't be serious. Deadly. Meet me at the Bayside Marina. Slip 47 1 hour. Come alone, or the next evidence package goes directly to the DI. Jake ended the call, meeting Riley's incredulous stare. You're setting yourself up as bait, she realized. Phillips is methodical. He'll assume it's a trap. Take time to analyze options, deploy resources to the marina. Jake checked his watch. Meanwhile, our real operation proceeds. At precisely 2:17 a.m., Carlos received confirmation from his security contact shift change complete. Cameras in the East Wing malfunctioning for maintenance. Simultaneously, Taylor Chun, now safely with his grandmother, began a social media storm, posting his story across platforms with supporting documentation Jake had provided. Sandra's nursing credentials provided the final piece. Her call to the Florida Department of Health triggered an automatic 24-hour investigation protocol. No patient transfers permitted until completed. As dawn approached, Jake sat beside Ellie in Riley's car, watching the marina where Phillips had never appeared. As expected, police cruisers had arrived instead, searching empty boat slips for the meeting that was never meant to happen. They're evacuating 28 patients right now, Sandra reported, hanging up from a call with her inside contact. Carlos's friends got them out through the laundry exit. Where to? Jake asked. 3 different locations, church shelters, and a sympathetic doctor's private clinic. Sandra's expression showed both relief and worry, but there are still over 50 inside. Ellie squeezed Jake's hand. It's working. Now we need to make enough noise, they can't silence us. As sunrise painted the sky, they drove toward their meeting with Vega, the journalist. Behind them, the first breaking news alerts appeared on local stations. Patient abuse allegations, Rock prestigious rehab facility. The avalanche had begun. Vega met them in the empty parking garage of an abandoned shopping center, a man with perpetually rumpled clothes and the intense focus of someone who lived for the next big story. He recorded their testimonies methodically, his expression darkening as each patient described their experiences. This is Pulitzer material, he told Jake, securing copies of billing records and medication logs. But they'll come at you, hard discredit you as addicts, criminals, unreliable witnesses. That's why we need your platform, Ellie replied. Your credibility, Vega nodded. My editor's already reviewing. We'll run online this afternoon. Print tomorrow. He paused. But you need to understand, once this publishes, you're all in the crosshairs. Phillips and his people will deny everything. We've considered that, Jake said. Just make it count. As they left the meeting, news alerts buzzed on their phones. Sunrise Recovery Center had called an emergency press conference, announcing dangerous patient escapees and violent staff assaults. Controlling the narrative, Sandra muttered. Jake checked his secure messaging app. Carlos reported 15 more patients evacuated, with volunteer nurses from a local church providing medical supervision. But the facility had implemented lockdown protocols, sealing remaining exits. They're adapting, Mike observed grimly. Tightening security. Riley's phone rang, her voice contact inside the police department. After a brief conversation, she turned to the group. They've issued warrants for all of us. Kidnapping, assault, criminal conspiracy. They're desperate, Jake said. Good, desperate people make mistakes. They regrouped at a motel Riley had secured under a false name, watching the press conference. On a flickering television, Dr. Phillips stood at a podium, the picture of professional concern, in his white coat and somber expression. These vulnerable patients have been manipulated by a financial consultant who infiltrated our facility, Phillips told reporters. Jake Palmer is wanted in 3 states for fraud and has a history of exploiting vulnerable populations. Jake watched impassively as his mugshot appeared on screen. Everything Phillips said about his criminal history was true, a fact that would complicate their credibility. We are cooperating fully with authorities to safely recover our patients, Phillips continued smoothly. Many require critical medication and supervision for their conditions. The broadcast cut to Marcus Wentworth standing with a sobbing woman, identified as Taylor Chen's mother. My son was improving here, she cried. Now I don't know where he is or if he's safe. Jake exchanged glances with Ellie. Taylor said his mother died 3 years ago. Paid actress, Riley suggested. Old contract. A breaking news banner interrupted the press conference. Reports of patient abuse at Sunrise facility under investigation. Former nurse among escapees alleges systematic fraud. Phillips' expression flickered momentarily before he regained composure. Vega had begun publishing. We need to move again, Mike said, ever the tactician. They'll trace us to this location soon. As they gathered their meager belongings, Jake's secure phone buzzed with an urgent message from Carlos. Emergency. Sandra's clearance being used at facility. Security alerted. Jake showed the message to the others. Sandra's still here. Someone's using her credentials. Head nurse has override access, Sandra explained. Faze Pauling. They could access any door with my codes. Another message from Carlos. Multiple ambulance transfers initiated. Paperwork says Atlanta facility. They're moving the remaining patients now, Ellie realized. Before the story gains traction, Jake made a split-second decision. Riley, get everyone to the backup location. I'm going back in. That's suicide, Riley argued. I got them into this. I'm not abandoning them. Ellie stepped forward. I'm coming with you. I know the medical protocols if patients are sedated. Mike stood, military bearing and full evidence. 3 is tactical minimum. I'm in. Despite Riley's protests, they took her car, racing toward Sunrise. As sunset painted the sky in ironic tranquility, they parked 2 blocks away, Approaching on foot through service roads, Carlos had identified at the rear service entrance. They found Carlos waiting, with a maintenance cart piled with laundry, ambulances loading at main entrance, he reported. 19 patients, staged 4 transfer. Sandra's code's still working, they haven't reset the system yet. Security, Mike asked. Double patrols? Armed now. Police presence at front gate. Jake nodded toward the laundry. Our disguise? Staff uniforms? Underneath badges that will scan won't match your faces, if anyone looks closely, but might get you through doors. They donned the disguises, and Carlos swiped them in through the service entrance. Inside, controlled chaos reigned, staff rushing to prepare patients. Security personnel stationed at key junctions. Administrative assistants shredding documents. They're destroying evidence, Jake observed. Let them try, Ellie replied. We have copies of everything. They moved through back corridors toward the east wing where transfers were being staged. At the final security door, a guard stopped them. ID verification, he demanded. Mike stepped forward, badge extended. As the guard leaned to examine it, Mike executed a swift, precise movement, pressure applied to exactly the right point on the guard's neck. The man crumpled silently. Marine Force Recon. Mike explained mildly, catching the guard's body, has its uses. Beyond the door, they found their nightmare-realized patients lined up on gurneys, heavily sedated, tagged for transfer-like packages. We can't move them all, Jake said grimly. Ellie was already checking for lines, adjusting medications. We don't have to. Just disrupt the transfer long enough for the authorities to intervene. Mike nodded toward the fire alarm. Old school, but effective. As alarms blared through the facility, Jake made his final move. He walked directly to the nurse's station and broadcast a message through the PA system. Attention all Sunrise staff. This is Jake Palmer. The FBI is currently receiving evidence of patient abuse and insurance fraud. Any staff participating in patient transfers will be considered accomplices. This is your only warning. In the ensuing chaos, they moved from gurney to gurney, whispering to confused patients, removing excessive sedatives, promising help was coming, and in the main corridor, they came face to face with Marcus Wentworth. Marcus wasn't alone. 2 security contractors flanked him, hands hovering near concealed weapons. You just can't help yourself, can you, Palmer? Marcus said, almost conversationally. Always the hero now. Let the patients go, Marcus, Jake replied, positioning himself between Marcus and Ellie. It's over. The story's breaking across all major outlets. Stories can be discredited. Witnesses discredited. Marcus stepped closer, especially witnesses with histories of addiction and fraud. Not all of us, Mike said quietly, steady beside Jake. Marcus laughed. A washed-up drunk vet, a nurse who stole medications, a janitor with no legal status. He shook his head. Who? Do you think the public will believe you are respected medical professionals? Jake smiled thinly. How about the FBI? Marcus's expression faltered slightly. Bluffing am I? Jake held up his phone, displaying a message chain. Riley's journalist friend Vega has connections. The kind that expedite federal investigations when evidence suggests imminent harm. You've got nothing concrete, Marcus insisted, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Insurance fraud documentation, patient testimony, medication logs showing intentional overprescription. Oh, and this. Jake pressed play on his phone, and Marcus's voice filled the corridor. $8,000 per patient, per month. Insurance pays, we keep them longer, we make more. Simple. The recording continued, damning in its clarity. That's the beauty of addiction treatment. Families are desperate, courts mandate treatment, and our medication protocols ensure compliance. Marcus lunged for the phone. The security men moved forward, but Mike was faster. A precise strike dropped the first guard while Carlos, appearing from nowhere, tackled the second. As Marcus and Jake grappled for the phone, distant sirens penetrated the fire alarm's wail. Federal agents, shouted voices from the main entrance. Everyone stay where you are. Marcus froze, his face a mask of cold fury. You're finished too, Palmer. Your criminal record, probably, Jake agreed, stepping back. Worth it. What followed was organized chaos. FBI agents secured the facility, medical personnel evaluated patients, and staff members were separated for questioning. Jake, Ellie, Mike, and Carlos were handcuffed, but treated with surprising restraint. Vega's influence at work, Jake suspected. As agents led Marcus away, he locked eyes with Jake. We're not so different. You and I, we both saw an opportunity. Jake watched him go, the truth of those words settling uncomfortably. Dawn broke as Jake sat in an FBI field office, explaining his role in everything, the initial fraud, his change of heart, the evidence he'd gathered. He held nothing back, knowing his own legal exposure. Mr. Palmer, the lead agent said, after hours of testimony, your criminal history complicates matters. However, your actions potentially saved lives. What happens now? That depends on the U.S. Attorney's Office. Your cooperation will be noted. In the hallway, Jake found Ellie waiting, dark circles under her eyes, but a fierce light within them. The peer patients, he asked immediately, all accounted for. Phillips and 3 staff physicians are in custody. Taylor's statement corroborated everything. She hesitated. They're saying charges against you might be reduced in exchange for testimony, and you the others. Sandra's nursing license is under review, but likely safe given her eventual cooperation. Carlos has immigration concerns, but there's talk of considerations given the circumstances. She smiled slightly. Mike's already giving a statement to the VA Inspector General about veteran treatment practices, and you, Jake repeated. My medical board hearing is next month. Might get my license back. She studied him. No regrets. You could have walked away with the money, started fresh somewhere. Jake thought of Emily, of choices made and paths not taken. No regrets, he said simply. Over the following days, the story exploded across national media. Rehab ransom, the headlines called it, held captive for insurance payments, sedated into compliance, families manipulated and lied to. Vega's detailed expose triggered investigations at all 5 Sunrise facilities, revealing identical patterns of abuse and fraud. Released on bail pending charges. Jake watched the coverage from a cheap motel room, his assets frozen, his future uncertain. Each report featured more patients coming forward, more families discovering loved ones had been victimized. The estimated fraud totaled in the tens of millions. His phone rang. Ellie calling from the volunteer clinic, where she now helped former patients transition to legitimate treatment. Turn on Channel 7, she said without preamble. They just announced the indictments. Jake watched as the prosecutor detailed 47 counts against Dr. Phillips, 31 against Marcus, and various charges against 15 other Sunrise staff members. At the very end, the prosecutor added, as for Jake Palmer and the others who exposed this operation, their cooperation and the extraordinary circumstances are being taken into consideration as we determine appropriate charges. It wasn't freedom, but it was something. 3 months after the Sunrise rescue, Jake sat in a federal courtroom, watching Marcus Wentworth receive his sentence, 18 years for fraud, conspiracy, and patient abuse. Dr. Phillips had already pleaded guilty in exchange for 15 years. Prosecutors had made examples of them both. Jake's own legal reckoning had been complicated. His extensive criminal history warranted significant prison time, yet his role in exposing Sunrise created a unique circumstance. After weeks of negotiation, he'd accepted a deal, 3 years in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years of supervised release. All things considered, he'd gotten off lightly. As the bailiff led Marcus away, their eyes met briefly. No words were exchanged, none were needed. They had both chosen their paths. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed as Jake emerged with his attorney. He'd become an unlikely symbol in the ongoing national conversation about addiction treatment reform. Some called him a hero, others an opportunist who'd turned on his co-conspirators when the scheme collapsed. Both were partially right. Mr. Palmer, do you regret your role in the Sunrise operation? Shouted a reporter. Jake paused on the courthouse steps. I regret not stopping it sooner. You're still going to prison despite helping expose the fraud. Is that fair? Fairer than what happened to the patients at Sunrise? A familiar figure waited at the bottom of the steps. Ellie, looking transformed in professional clothing, her nursing ID visible on a lanyard. You didn't have to come, Jake said when he reached her. I wanted to see it through. She studied him. How are you holding up? 3 years isn't forever. Ellie nodded toward a nearby park. Walk with me. They strolled in silence for several minutes. The weight of everything that had happened and what was still to come hanging between them. I got my license reinstated, Ellie said finally. Full privileges. The board considered my addiction a disability protected under ADA once they reviewed my treatment at Sunrise. That's great, Jake said, genuinely pleased. Where will you practice? That's what I wanted to talk about. She stopped, turning to face him. Taylor Chen's grandmother donated her house to create a recovery center. Legitimate, ethical treatment. Evidence-based protocols. Her eyes shone with purpose. I'm the clinical director. You'll be amazing at it. Mike's involved 2 peer counseling for veterans. Carlos is our facilities manager. She hesitated, and we need a financial officer. Someone who understands the system well enough to keep it honest. Jake laughed softly. An ex-con with fraud convictions. Perfect choice. In 3 years, Ellie clarified. When you're out, the position will be waiting. The offer stunned him. Why would you trust me with that? Because you had every reason to walk away, and you didn't. She smiled slightly. People can change. Jake, I'm living proof. Before he could respond, Jake's phone buzzed a reminder. 2 hours until he needed to report to begin his sentence. I should go, he said. Things to take care of before... Ellie nodded, understanding. We'll visit, all of us letters to... As they parted, Jake felt something unfamiliar, not the sharp thrill of a successful con, or the adrenaline rush of a narrow escape, but something steadier. Purpose? Perhaps. His last stop was a small cemetery on Miami's outskirts. He hadn't visited Emily's grave since the funeral 3 years earlier, too consumed by anger and self-loathing to face the permanence of the headstone. The simple marker bore only her name, dates, and the words beloved daughter and sister. Jake placed a small bouquet of daisies, her favorite, against the stone. I messed up him, he said quietly. For a long time, but I think maybe I finally did something right. He touched the cool marble. I wish you could have met Ellie. You'd have liked her. As the afternoon sun began its descent, Jake walked back to his rental car. In the glove compartment was a sealed envelope Riley had given him before disappearing to parts unknown. Funds, ID documents, everything needed to run. He could still choose that path. Vanish before reporting to serve his sentence. Start fresh somewhere beyond extradition. The old Jake would have already been on his way to the airport. Instead, he drove to the federal facility where he would spend the next 3 years. The envelope, untouched in the car, he would leave behind. Sometimes, the right choice was also the hardest one. As he approached the intake building, Jake thought of the patients now receiving proper treatment, of families reunited, of lives potentially saved from Sunrise's deadly protocols. For the first time in his life, Jake Palmer walked voluntarily toward consequences rather than away from them. 2 years and 7 months into his 3-year sentence, Jake received unexpected news. Parole granted, effective immediately. His consistent cooperation in ongoing investigations against larger healthcare fraud networks had finally tipped the scales in his favor. He emerged from minimum security on a crisp autumn morning, carrying a single duffel bag containing everything he now owned. The world had continued without him. New phone models, political shifts, cultural references he didn't understand. Waiting in the visitor's parking lot was a familiar face, Mike Brennan, standing ramrod straight beside a modest sedan. Transportation service, sir? Mike said with a hint of a smile, opening the passenger door. They sent you all the way from Miami? Jake asked, genuinely surprised. Tampa now, actually. The recovery center relocated. Bigger facility. Mike pulled onto the highway. Lots changed. During the drive south, Mike filled Jake in on developments. Following the Sunrise scandal, state and federal authorities had enacted significant regulatory reforms for addiction treatment facilities. The Sunrise laws, people called them. Taylor's in college now, Mike reported. Pre-med says he wants to become an addiction specialist. And Doris, Mrs. Chen. Doris passed 6 months ago, peaceful, with family. Mike's expression softened. Mrs. Chen lives independently. Visits the center weekly to lead meditation sessions. Carlos? Citizenship hearing next month. His testimony against Sunrise fast-tracked his application. Jake absorbed it all. This chronicle of lives continuing, healing, growing. And Ellie, he asked finally. Mike glanced at him. She's the one you should ask about herself. The Tampa facility occupied a former boutique hotel. Sunlit common areas, garden spaces, clinical offices with soothing colors and comfortable furniture. Nothing like Sunrise's sterile corridors and locked wards. As Mike led him inside, Jake saw the sign above reception, Second Chance Recovery Center. Staff members nodded in recognition as they passed some former patients from Sunrise, now employed in support roles. In the main office, Sandra Wells looked up from a computer, her surprise quickly turning to a warm smile. Jake Palmer. Finally, they embraced briefly. Former conspirators turned colleagues. Clinical directors in the East Garden, Sandra told him. Staff meeting just wrapped up. Jake found Ellie alone among raised planting beds where residents grew vegetables and herbs as part of their therapy. The years had added subtle lines around her eyes, but her posture held the same quiet strength he remembered. She turned at his approach, her smile, immediate and genuine. You're early. We weren't expecting you for 3 more months. Good behavior, Jake replied. That's new for me. She laughed, a sound he'd heard too rarely during those chaotic days at Sunrise. The job offer still stands, Ellie said after a moment. If you're interested, about that. ... Double quotes. Jake hesitated. I've been thinking. My skills, they were always about finding angles, working systems, identifying vulnerabilities. Exactly why we need you. But maybe there's a better application. Jake took a deep breath. While inside, I started consulting with the FBI's healthcare fraud division, helping identify schemes like Sunrise. Turns out I'm pretty good at it. Ellie's expression was unreadable. You're turning down our offer, modifying it. I'd like to split my time, part here, handling your legitimate billing and compliance, part working with authorities to shut down the next Sunrise before it happens. She considered this, then nodded slowly. The poacher turned gamekeeper. Something like that. A comfortable silence settled between them as a group of residents worked nearby, planting winter seedlings. There's something else, Jake said finally. Something I never told you about why I stayed at Sunrise after I realized what was happening. I assumed it was Emily, Ellie replied softly. Your sister. Jake looked at her in surprise. How did you? You mentioned her name once, when you were feverish after the bullet wound. I looked her up later. Ellie's eyes held compassion without pity. Overdose? 3 years before Sunrise? You blamed yourself. I could have helped her. Should have seen the signs. The admission still hurt. Even after all this time, I was too busy with my schemes, my cons, too focused on money, and now. Jake gestured to the facility around them. Now I understand what Emily needed, what all of them need. Not judgment, not exploitation, just a genuine chance to heal. Ellie touched his arm lightly. That's why you'll be good at this job. Later that afternoon, Jake stood before his first group session, 10 residents in various stages of recovery, watching him with the wariness of people who had learned the hard way to distrust authority figures. My name is Jake Palmer, he began. Simply, I'm not a doctor or a therapist. I'm a former conman and a convicted felon. He let that sink in before continuing. I also helped expose one of the largest addiction treatment frauds in Florida history, and I'm here because I believe everyone deserves better than what I found at Sunrise Recovery Center. Slowly, as he shared his story, all of it, the fraud and the redemption, he watched their expressions shift from suspicion to something else. Recognition, perhaps? Understanding. When he finished, a young woman raised her hand hesitantly. Did you ever think about just taking the money and running, before it all went down? Jake nodded. Every day. Why didn't you? He thought of Emily, of Ellie's unwavering gaze that first night at Sunrise, of choices that defined a life. Because sometimes, he said quietly, the right path isn't the easiest one. And sometimes the person you've been isn't the person you have to remain. That evening, Jake stood alone on the center's rooftop garden, watching the sunset paint Tampa's skyline in warm golden hues. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, systems to learn, a new life to build. His phone chimed with a text from Riley, off the grid, still watching from the shadows. Proud of you, Palmer. Who'd have thought? Who, indeed, Jake thought, smiling as he put the phone away. Below him, the recovery center hummed with activity, a community of broken people helping each other become whole again. He'd spent most of his life as a taker. Now, finally, he had found something worth giving back. Not a bad con. In the end,